Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
My name is Jeff.
And we have a very special guest with us today, Freeman from Encounter This.
Oh, hey there, from the frosty lands of Canada.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess to the two of you, how are you doing today?
Pretty all right, I'd say.
Not terrible. Things could have gone a lot worse.
Sure.
Despite the frosty lands of the north here, it's extremely rainy in the west coast. I'm in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And it's pretty miserable, but I'll take it over snow any day. I can tell you that much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, we live in the like Detroit area, and it has been very rainy for the last couple months.
Right. Yeah.
We've had rainstorms, we've had thunderstorms. It's been a lot.
The summers here have tended to shift like in this really annoying way where we had 37 straight days of no rain and intense heat and back-to-back heat waves, and then pure rain. Just pure, unadulterated, nonstop rain, and that will go for months on end, essentially.
Sure. So it was just recently my wedding anniversary. I know I mentioned that on our last episode. I just got back from being out of town. We went on a trip to Las Vegas.
Nice.
Which was a lot of fun. We stayed in an Airbnb with some friends that the Airbnb had arcade games in it, had a bunch of arcade one-ups. It had a shuffleboard table, had a pool table. It had a pool. It had all sorts of amazing stuff. I wish we could have been there longer because we were only there for a few days, and then the whole time we were there, we were busy, so we didn't really get to play many of the games or do much of the stuff at the Airbnb because we were so busy doing cool stuff elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Too many fun things to do. Oh,
right.
I know. The thing is, though, like it was intentionally a short trip because I'm kind of a wet blanket, and I always get kind of. I don't really enjoy when vacations are too long. Like we went on a cruise a couple of years ago, and it was a week long, and like 4 days in, I was ready to go home.
Oh yeah.
So it was on my request that this one be intentionally short, but then, after when we're getting ready on our third day or whatever to get ready to go home, I'm like, maybe we could have made this a little bit longer. Whoever was in charge of making this as short as it was,
Right.
shake my finger at them.
Well, I think your mistake was comparing cruises to normal life.
Yeah, I guess. Fair enough.
I
That's
don't know.
a very good point.
I haven't personally been on any cruises, but I hear so many horror stories about it. And so I just feel like a week on a cruise sounds terrible.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, cruises are probably my favorite type of vacation. Cruises are amazing. It's not the fault of the cruise that I was sick of it after 4 days. It's just, that's too long of a vacation.
Sure.
I hope this doesn't wedge anything between Gabe and myself, but I used to work and my hometown is on the coast, the east coast of Canada, and we used to get it's a very seasonal business in the hospitality industry. I've been serving and bartending for a long time, and we used to get cruise ships in the summer all the time. And just serving the patrons from these cruise ships makes me never want to go on a cruise ship.
Fair enough.
They ruined the idea for me permanently because they were just so obnoxious and so annoying. Yeah. I hope you're not one of those, Gabe.
No. It actually came up on our Discord that one of our listeners said something along the lines of, a lot of people tend to forget to pack their manners when they go on vacation. I pack extra manners just to be safe in case anybody forgot theirs.
Oh man, how very un-American of you.
I guess. So no, I mean, it's just like it's basically like staying in a hotel where there's infinite food and lots of shows for you to go to and everything.
Right.
So.
I always forget that detail where, like, if Gabe has access to an all-you-can-eat anything, it's like it's just so many notches above everything else.
That's what vacation's really about, is it?
Jeff, I could wake up at 3 a.m. and go and have them make me a pizza.
Right. Like, yeah, that's okay. See, I understand now. I understand. I completely forgot because, like, yeah, you could have as much as you want, and like Gabe, Gabe's never been a big, like he's a tall man, but he's not a big guy. He's never been. So like he's got ridiculous metabolism.
Yep.
What's the food? What was the food quality though? Your 3 a.m. pizza.
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. It was maybe like a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
It was not great, but it was unlimited and it was still worth eating.
7 out of 10, all you can eat 24 hours, I'd say is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
that's yeah. Well.
Anyway, enough of vacation talk.
I was gonna say the all you can eat spaghetti at Big Boy. That's pretty good too.
That actually is pretty good. Anyway, Freeman, why don't you tell our listeners about yourself, about your show? What is Encounter This?
Yeah, okay. So my name's Freeman. I am a co-host on a podcast called Encounter This, where we basically discuss creatures and monsters in particular, with a very much a focus on audio-only content. We didn't really want to break into the video scene. There's so many people out there already doing that. And we just want to do something a little more unique and really focused on our format, so that we even sort of designed it to have people who were completely unfamiliar with D&D to be able to listen, so they could hear the lore and the ideas first and ignore the mechanics later. So we put that at the tail end on purpose. And we really purposely formatted, designed it to be more accessible to more people, although with the knowledge that it's a very niche kind of topic, because it's something that's typically more for GMs or DMs, because it really gets in the nitty-gritty details in some respects, that some might consider to be spoilers, especially if you're newer to the genre. But in any case, I've been playing tabletop RPGs for not all that long, actually. I think somewhere around 5 years at this point. Reasonably late start, but I've always been a video game nerd, and I've been bartending, serving for a long time. I've done a lot of stage performance and stuff as well, and I've always been this sort of active, creative kind of type. And moved to the West Coast in Vancouver in late 2015, and shortly after that's how I got started with my partner James, who was the head chef at the place I worked at originally. Sure. When I first got here. So
that's really cool. Yeah, you guys, you were talking about like you've done some theater and stuff. You guys do add a lot of like performance and theatricalness, I guess. Theatrics to your episodes, and I always think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. We always wanted to start with cold opens on the episodes with always custom written creative writing expositions and that sort of thing, and we've maintained that for a while, and it's been really, really, really fun, and it's such a great creative outlet. It's always really fun to just off the cuff discuss. And then do that surrounding something that at its core is unbelievably creative and meant to be, from the ground up. And so it's super fun.
Cool. So one of our patrons, Peastroy Pancakes, has actually been trying to get me to listen to you guys for quite some time. I think probably since like right around when you started.
Oh, yeah?
And I put it on the back burner. I had a list of other podcasts I had to get to, and I'll get to it eventually. I finally did a few months ago, and I was hooked. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, you messaged me and you were like, oh, so, Peastroy Pancakes told me about you. It was, she recently mentioned you to me. And you were like, oh, yeah, I binged your show. I was like, holy shit, James, we're bingeable. Check that out. So we must be doing all right. Yeah, so I was super stoked about that. Really, really exciting. Like I said, I wish I had more time to invest in more podcasts when sadly, my life and job choice does not exactly allow it. Sure. I was just joking with Gabe off mic a second ago how I now have a pipe dream of being the silent bartender, so I could just continue listening to more and more podcasts and getting more content in. James being a chef, like he gets loads more in. I'm super jealous.
There you go.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I guess not everybody can have a job where they can just turn their brain off like I do.
Yeah.
I wish.
All right. Well, you guys want to go ahead and get into this episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I want the two of you to imagine that one day, I'll say the two of you in this fictional scenario, the two of you are geologists. And you've been hearing that there have been reports of what are called in the scientific community ooparts, that is, out-of-place artifacts. Out-of-place artifacts are when something is found in like the geological stratum that, at least at first glance, seems to not be in the correct time frame. So something that seems like it's a little bit early, or maybe something that shows up in some rock that is younger than some other rock or whatever. Well, so you're investigating some of these geological strata, and you find a rock that is like broken in half, and you sort of like peel apart, you pull off one of the halves that is broken, and it's the oddest thing. On the inside of this rock, it almost looks like someone's drawn something. There's like a big red X, and then there's like a dotted line that goes through various places in the area, and you realize that this is a map. And do you know where this map leads?
Oh, where does it lead?
This map leads to the Dragon's Hoard.
Ooh.
Or so you presume. I mean, you're not actually following it yet. You're still looking at it. You probably got to write a report.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's a pretty boring job, actually.
Yeah, we got to go through the whole bureaucratic process first, eh? Yeah.
Sure. All right. So, Freeman, you brought in a magic item today. Is that correct?
I did.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us and the listeners what the item is?
It is called the Earthen Sling. This was one of the earliest, if not the first magic item I ever created when I first got into D&D. About a year or so after we had started our first campaign, I actually ended up moving to Australia for a year, which features prominently in stories on Encounter This. And I'd spent a lot of time introducing two separate groups in these two places that I work to D&D. And this was one of the earliest ideas I ever had, because I looked at the sling and I thought to myself, David apparently killed Goliath with a sling, but this thing only does 1d4? That's boring.
Sure.
Now, of course, balance is an important part of all that, as in no way should a sling be doing more than, say, your average short bow. So I did understand it and get it, but it still got my creative juices going. So the Earthen Sling is a magically imbued sling, which normally is a 1d4 bludgeoning ammunition and ranged 30 to 120 weapon in 5e. And of course, this is built on 5e, but could very well be transferred to other systems, I think. But basically, it reacts to different types of rock that are flung from the seat of the sling.
Okay.
And it results in alternate damage types and additional effects. Arguably, this is a reasonably powerful weapon because of its dynamics, but I also kind of tagged on that. Yeah, at the GM's discretion, you might require a nature or survival check to determine which rocks you actually kind of find and place in this seat. But I did I remember doing a little bit of research. I pulled this from my old notes and kind of polished it up, but in no way is this necessarily balanced, especially on the math side of things. But and let's get this one thing for sure. Despite what Gabe said, I am not a geologist.
It was a fictional scenario, as I said.
Thank goodness. I don't know much really about rocks, but I broke it down to like the three sort of more well-known categories of rocks. We have igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rocks. So I thought it was pretty important at the time to make sure that each rocks were found in certain terrains, because terrains are automatically broken down for very obvious reasons in 5e and various other systems. So igneous rocks can be found in the Arctic mountains or Underdark. And these rocks are usually formed when hot molten lava crystallizes and solidifies. So what I went with was the effect changes the rock to fire damage. And I kept it at a 1d4, but then added a dexterity saving throw, or the creature can be ignited. And then at the beginning of each of their turns, they would take 1d10 fire damage, significantly increasing the damage of this weapon. If the flames aren't doused, of course, which any creature can spend a standard action to just pat them out. So I didn't want to be too complicated or laborious to stop said fire, but the danger is real.
Sure. I like how it's automatic as long as you just spend an action to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a couple of real-life examples of igneous rocks would be like andesite, basalt, obsidian, pumice, to name a few that are a little more well-known. And then we have sedimentary rocks. If you happen to pick up a sedimentary rock, it would be in the Arctic coastal or desert areas. And these are formed by the accumulation or deposition of mineral or organic particles. and they sort of flake apart fairly easily, essentially. And I wanted them to have a little more impact, so they do a 1d6 bludgeoning. But I took a little inspiration from the spell Ice Knife, in that it explodes on impact.
Oh, yeah.
So you have your bludgeoning up front, but then it goes to 2d4 piercing to all creatures within 5 feet. So it just has this sort of explosive effect. So you can kind of hit more enemies and have an area of effect, if you will.
Sure.
And real life examples of that would be like sandstone, limestone, and shale.
Yeah.
And then we have metamorphic. These are once igneous or sedimentary rocks, and they have been changed or metamorphosed as the result of intense heat or pressure. And they are crystalline and often have a squashed texture, if you will. Now these, I just felt like had this incredible density, and I wanted the magic to really come through, so I thought 1d8 force damage. And then any medium or larger creatures would have to attempt a constitution saving throw or be knocked back. And I went for like 10 feet, like nothing small.
Yeah.
And smaller creatures would have to do the same, but be knocked 10 feet, but also prone.
Okay.
And I originally had some really wonky DCs in there, so I kind of updated them to something around like DC 10 plus damage dealt, somewhere in the range of like a concentration check, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah. But that's the basic idea of the Earthen Sling. It was magically imbued and created to utilize real life sort of materials and rocks and their histories and how they're constructed and sort of emphasize those. Use the magic emphasizes and empowers those physical elements of these materials and puts it into action.
Yeah, I really like that. I like how the different types of rocks kind of do an effect that is similar to the process that created the rock or some kind of quality that the rocks have.
Yeah, exactly. Very much the intent.
Yeah.
Now, from there, I do have, if you guys are interested, I can go on.
Yeah, go for it.
And I also, at the time, was creating a homebrew world and had very much designed this in mind with that. And it was a very medium to high magic kind of world. And I had this sort of to the north Game of Thrones-esque area that I had created a thing called Rime Glass. Essentially a magical permafrost.
Okay.
That just never thaws. And any rock that would be found, it would be extremely rare to find a rock covered in rime glass. However, it still would respond in this sling. And the rime glass itself, being magical, would increase the power of said rock. So what you would do is, if you got a piece of rime glass, you would place it in the seat and roll a 1d6 to determine which rock is actually within the rime glass. And if you could roll a 1 to 2, you get a sedimentary rock, and the damage is simply increased to 2d6 and 44 piercing, bludgeoning and piercing, respectively. Mm-hmm. The metamorphic is a 3 to 4 on the d6, and it does 2d8 force damage. The DCs increase for the knockback and prone. And in fact, I even upped it to the point where the medium and larger creatures could be knocked down and prone, and smaller creatures would automatically be knocked prone, just because of the tremendous force behind it. But the real kicker here is the igneous rock, which gets replaced with a new feature. We're kind of getting into like almost a complicated character, monster stat block territory here.
Okay.
But the igneous rock is replaced with what's called true rime, and it does cold damage. And a constitution saving throw is required to avoid the effects of something called flourishing frost. And on a successful save, like usual, the stages will sort of stop and you become immune for 24 hours. However, if you do start to succumb, it goes in stages. And the stage 1 is basically DC 12 is where I put it at, and your speed is halved. Nothing crazy. However, at the start of each of your turns, you got to make another one as this flourishing frost spreads across your person. And if you fail again, you suddenly have disadvantage in all attacks because you are slowing down. And then one more stage on top of that, if you fail yet again, you become a statue of pure ice and frost, effectively gaining the petrified condition. Now, I also added in if you or the creature that is succumbing to this has resistance or weakness to cold, has advantage or disadvantage respectively. And magical fire can be used to stave off the effects, granting advantage on the saving throws, but it is magical in nature, so it pushes forward if it can. Sure. And one thing is for sure, is if you are frozen solid and you hit 0 hit points, you are permanently destroyed. Cannot be resurrected, save by the wish spell.
Oh, boy.
Now, it's very unlikely to fail all those in a row.
Sure.
Although I can say myself that I've actually in a one-shot once rolled 4 natural ones consecutively in a single turn, playing a monk. So I was in tears laughing at how amazing the bad luck was. And so it can happen. I know that it can. Anyway, that's my entirely too complicated magic item for you guys.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, there's a lot to that, but that's all really, really cool. I actually especially like the rime glass stuff. I like how it modifies each of the different types of rock that have already been detailed earlier in the item. And I love the how it progresses as you take the effects. I like how it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I had to pull, like I said before, I had to pull this from my old notes and polish it up because it was a bit of a mess. This is from a few years ago now, and sure. So I had to adjust this section significantly, that particular section, and I definitely leaned in a bit further into some stuff inspired from Pathfinder 2nd Edition in particular, where diseases and poisons have various stages that progress if you keep failing. So that there was definitely a little bit of more recent inspiration taken from there that's applied to this.
Sure.
But I think there's one tiny point I'd like to make as to why I chose this to present to you and why it's so complicated. And
sure,
I find that it's because it's an early example of what I felt I needed from 5e, but 5e didn't offer. And it was more depth and more complication.
Sure.
It's what I craved from it, and what I loved the most about 5e when I got started was how flexible you could make it. Yeah. But I found myself longing anyway for over time for deeper systems with more pieces intact, such as Pathfinder.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. I think I said in one of the recent episodes that I do think that 5th edition is not as complicated as previous editions were, and I think it could do with being a little bit more complicated in some regards. It also has the benefit of being simpler, that you can jump into it a little bit quicker. But I also really love Pathfinder 2e. I love how there's so much depth to it. There's so much you can do. So yeah, injecting a little bit of just a little bit more complexity could do it a good favor.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a really cool item. Thank you very much for bringing that in. I thought that's really cool.
Thanks for letting me rant about it. Lovely.
No problem.
Oh, it's awesome.
I love when people give me the stage.
Well, we'll probably give you the stage some more throughout this episode.
All right.
So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Jeff, did you have anything else about this?
No, not really. Other than maybe like as a player, I would maybe see myself trying to put more things in the sling, like what would a gold coin do?
Right.
Stuff like that.
I did try to account for that a little bit because I had a funny feeling. People would, especially new players, they were like, "Oh, I'm going to throw a gem in it." And see what happens. And maybe I didn't write it down here. I might have accidentally removed it, but the original idea was that no matter what you put in it, it's destroyed on impact. And gems simply act as metamorphic rocks because their inherent value is usually something that society applies to it, as opposed to and there's nothing inherently magical about an emerald, even in Forgotten Realms or what have you. So
tell that to the hedgehog.
Those are chaos emeralds, Jeff, not regular emeralds.
imbued with the energy of chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also probably why I had this check of the GM's discretion to determine what kind of rocks and what effect they might have in the sling, because there's a part of me that wants the player to throw a valuable ruby in there and waste it and destroy it. But I also wanted to make sure they have the opportunity to think ahead of time and make sure they didn't do it by mistake.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the Earthen Sling brought in by Freeman. Thank you very much, Freeman. Jeff, if anybody else wanted to submit magic items for the Dragon Sword, or they wanted to submit questions for our main segment, or stories for the Funeral Pyre or Retirement Village, how would they get those to us?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com or join us on our Interparty Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord.
That's correct. Before we go any further, Freeman, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find Encounter This or any other projects that you are working on and any other contact information you want to give out?
For sure. One thing's for sure is I personally don't spend a whole lot of time on social media.
Sure, but, that's probably for the best.
Yeah. But James, my co-host James, and I are extremely active via our Encounter This socials at the very least, so that we do stay in contact. You can certainly find us at patreon.com at EncounterPod. Same with Twitter at EncounterPod, Facebook.com/EncounterPod, and Instagram.com/encounter.pod, because we didn't have a choice. Thanks, Instagram.
Sure.
And of course, our website, encounterthis.ca, because, again, in the frosty lands of Canada. So you could certainly hit us up on any of those if you want to directly contact us, and of course, just listen to the episodes. Everything is free with no ads.
Cool. Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a great podcast.
Cheers.
All right. Well, before we go any further, we have a giveaway to give away today. Today we're giving away a copy of the Witch class from Seawood Scribe. It's one of the classes that was in Strahd's Manual of Shadow, which we were giving away last October. But this supplement is a full class. It's got a few subclasses. It's got some spells. It's like 38 pages. There's a ton of great stuff in there. So, Jeff, who is the winner of this great supplement this week?
This week's winner is James M.
Whoa, 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 winner! Yes, congratulations, James M. You should be getting that in your email pretty soon. Be sure to leave Seawood Scribe a review. The more reviews that they get, the more they can know to work on better products in the future, and the more attention they'll get. So the least we can ask is just please leave them a review. Let them know what you think. And of course, a big thank you to Seawood Scribe for facilitating this, for giving away this great supplement. So, Jeff, if anybody else wanted to be like James M. and they wanted to win a free copy of the Witch class, how would they enter the drawing?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com with Hocus Pocus in the subject line.
There you go. And then one more quick thing. Check out the other podcasts on the Crit Nation Fellowship. Check out Crit Academy, critacademy.com. Justin, Ian, and Austin create new and reusable content for players and DMs alike. Also, check out Brute Force and Ignorance. They're an actual play podcast on the network. And then check out D&D Character Lab and the Kind GM podcast. So go and check all of those out. Enough of all the admin. Let's get into some questions.
All right, our first question comes from Gamatoad on Reddit, and they ask, what monsters make the best big bad evil guy?
Yeah, so let's say you're planning out an adventure, planning out a campaign, and you're just not sure who you want the big villain to be at the end of the adventure or the campaign. What is a monster that springs to mind? Let's say for some reason it can't be a human or a player race. What sort of monster comes to mind is like, bam, that's the perfect villain for this campaign?
I have a particular love for hags.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Shameless self-promotion. At Encounter This, our very first, what we call suites, we every so often, I think we usually plan now for about 2 a year. We do a suite, and we cover a creature that takes more than one episode, and we try and we usually only release every 2 weeks. We try to cram them in a bit and get more into a month. And the very first one we ever did was hags, and we went through all 5.
Was it Haguary?
It was Haguary, yeah. You're not wrong. Yeah, it was January, and we went Haguary, and ever since we've been naming the suites in such a manner. In fact, currently, as of this recording, we are in the middle of releasing Orktober.
Nice.
I love it.
Nice.
We're not the only ones to have come up with that, but hey, it works, right?
Sure.
So hags I love, and in particular, I would suggest everyone listening who's curious to check out Haguary. It's 5 episodes long, and it became a discussion of how to use hags in many, many ways, but also the whole time I was working on it, I kept imagining that not just one hag is the enemy, but there's hag after hag after hag in this ongoing campaign. of these various hags that are in or not in covens, and they have this sort of social understanding that's built into them to respect the more powerful or the more knowledgeable and older hags, even though they despise each other. And it's this really, really interesting social concept between them. And they are generally loners, but sometimes do have to obey or work together, given certain circumstances. And they're just such a really cool, extremely dark and brutal, macabre creature. Something that is not for the faint of heart. You want a real dark horror kind of style campaign that's really brutal and nasty. They are your go-to. But I think the main reason that really makes me love them is that they are built on manipulation. They are there to manipulate you. They are there to make you promises, but with caveats you can't see, like a really, really poorly reviewed contract.
Sure.
So hags pops out right away.
Yeah. I think hags are great. I think this was actually before I listened to Haguary, but we had our Patreon had a monthly Roll20 game, and I don't think I thought of them as the big bad, but thinking back now that the campaign's over, hags were kind of the big bad of the campaign. The first little story arc had the players find out that a hag was behind this like attack on the city they were in. And then the great thing about hags is that it is very easy to assume that they are part of a coven. So when there's one hag, you can very easily put in the seeds for mention of there being more hags. And so in this case, I don't remember if I said it first or if the players asked, but the hag mentioned something about sisters. Like before they defeated it, said something about its sisters. And so now it's, okay, now we have to find the rest of the hags. We have to track them down.
Right.
Because they're probably watching us right now. They're probably planning even more stuff and so on. And so yeah, hags are definitely a great example of a big bad evil, big bad evil person, I guess, the BBEP.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Funnily enough, though, because I don't think hags were quite the CR that I needed for the party at the time, I used the stats for a Mind Flayer. And Mind Flayers are probably what I would pick as like my one of my favorites.
Elder Brain was the next on my list.
Yeah.
So yeah. We are in the same mode here.
Yeah.
You're not wrong about the CR with hags too, and that was sort of the beauty, I think, of that suite, and the way I was picturing, the ongoing danger, because you have a fairly wide variety of hag options just in the 5e core books, that do spread across a decent CR range. So I don't think they really go beyond 9 though, which is a shame. But there are loads of homebrew hags out there, tons of them. And in fact, as our 50th anniversary or 50th episode, for Encounter This, we did a Pathfinder 2nd edition hag as a celebration, which is called a blood hag. So we didn't really get into converting it to 5e or anything, but it was just a really fun example of what more there could be. Yeah.
Jeff, what are some ideas you have?
Well, I mean, I'm always into Mind Flayers and Elder Brains and stuff. That's it's like definitely my favorite. But well, I was trying to come up with something that wasn't just Mind Flayers.
I mean, it can just be Mind Flayers.
I mean, it's like...
The great thing about Mind Flayers is that they are intelligent, and they have mental abilities that they can use to subjugate others.
Right. They can make thralls. They can. I mean, they can eat. They can eat brains, and like there's even like at the very least. Because I always go back to the 3.5, or actually it was just 3rd edition, Savage Species, Prestige class, 4 Illithids, Illithid Savant, in which they could absorb the abilities of the brains that they eat and add them to their stats, basically. So like,
I love that.
If they ate the brain of a rogue, they could gain sneak attack. So I always like the idea. Actually, I do have something more specific in mind.
Okay.
There's the type of illithid. Is it the Ulithard?
Ulitharid.
Illitharid? Yeah, which is just a large size, like more powerful Illithid. But I like imagined like one of those basically kind of like severing himself from the Elder Brain. And like going so far as maybe becoming an Alhoon, which is I think what an Illithid Lich is called.
Essentially, yeah, that's essentially what they are, yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of just basically going off and doing his own dang thing, and like maybe he would like collect a bunch of thralls that would then gain power, and then once one got powerful enough, he'd eat their brain and take their power. I don't know. Like, yeah, I really do like Illithids.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me another self-promotion.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. Because they're going to get less and less shameless the more you allow me. Just letting you know.
Before we know it, the episode's ending with like, all right, and that's been an episode of Encounter This.
Yeah. If anyone were to get a hold of my partner James, he would be the first person to tell you that I get a bit carried away when I get a creative idea going, and so we had to establish rules for when we do suites, because I improvised an Illithid suite one time because it was a request on one of our Patreon tiers. Oh, I want you to do mind flayers. And I went, I can't just do mind flayers. We got to do them all. And we did. So we did a whole mini suite, if you will. I don't even call it mini. It was just quick and not planned. But we covered all of these Illithids and the Elder Brains and all of these creatures that you're talking about. They were so much fun. One of my favorite tiny little pieces that was in there, though, was from the cranium rats.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a cranium rat swarm. And in the lore description, it specifies that the more that gather together, the more their intelligence increases.
Yeah. Right.
But they don't give any stat block support for beyond a very low CR. And the first thing that started happening in my head was this small town sort of maybe mini campaign where things are really going wrong. There's some political issues happening, and there's a plague everywhere, and all these things have gone awry. And what's happened is some cranium rats have sort of escaped an elder brain or a group of Illithids and have basically infested the city in a very, very Victorian plague-esque kind of style. And the big reveal at the end of the campaign would be that it's not just that the sewers and the catacombs below the city or town are infested with rats, but rather the infestation is one massive hive mind of cranium rats. And that's literally your big bad. You've been fighting these weird cranium rats the whole way, all the time, but you don't realize they are actually the big bad.
Sure.
They just they become so huge that they're just so incredibly intelligent.
Right. The swarm is so massive and they're so hyper intelligent, and they've been manipulating the whole event, all the events the whole time.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Freeman, have you seen? There's been a picture going around from an upcoming 5th edition supplement, the Brainstealer Dragon.
No, I'm not familiar.
I'm going to send you the link. Listeners, go to Google and type in Brainstealer Dragon, or I just typed in Illithid Dragon.
Okay.
It's a monster that's going to be coming up in an upcoming book, and there's just a picture of it that is horrifying. It is my understanding that it's a dragon that has been like taken over by an elder brain or something, and it has a breath weapon that makes you like go insane or something.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's going to be in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons when that comes out.
Amazing. It looks so cool.
Yeah. I'll put that in the show notes.
Amazing.
So another creature that I think is worth mentioning really is either a lich or a vampire, any kind of undead. Any kind of intelligent undead, just because this is something that, if not killed, will literally live forever. So it may, I guess live being an unarguable term, but it could have theoretically existed for centuries, millennia. So someone who has had the time to come up with a plan that has taken hundreds of years to formulate is a scary thing. So Any campaign where the end, the end boss turns out to be a lich or a vampire, whatever, that has been planning this for years, centuries, whatever. That's got a thumbs up from me.
Mm-hmm. Big time. It puts me in mind of Matt Colville. I assume you guys are familiar with Matt Colville?
Yep.
Yeah. He's got that Running the Game YouTube series he's been doing for quite a while. And I remember just one where he was talking about having the big bad show up when they're really low and making everyone feel like they're powerless, and then making sure the guy recurs over and over and over. And I always love that concept. And that's just what liches and vampires always put me in mind of something like that.
Sure. Well, I may be referencing Matt Colville. Both of the two of the things you just mentioned, I may be referencing in later in the episode.
Oh, sure. Okay.
All right. Our next question comes from Dustin on Discord, and they ask, what is your favorite villain trope, and how often do you use them?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of get right out here and say that the trope of the recurring villain, it's a very difficult thing to pull off successfully in D&D, just because D&D isn't really a thing where, if the players can attack it, they will.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
As opposed to a book where the writer can have the characters not attack the villain for whatever reason. In D&D, that's a little bit harder. Also, there's the question of if they are attacking the villain, why doesn't the villain just kill them?
Right.
So it's a hard thing to pull off, but when it's done successfully, that's awesome. So like if you can have the villain show up at an opportunity where the players are not in a position to fight them, and there is a reason for the villain not to just kill them right then and there. If you can have the villain escape, or if it is a lich and they kill it and then it comes back later because it's a lich and they haven't destroyed its phylactery, that is something that can work really well. I would just encourage DMs to maybe don't do it every time you want to do it, just because you'll probably be tempted to force it. And when it's forced, it never feels good.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's like the sort of trope that I love the idea of, but I don't think I've had the bravery to try it myself.
Sure.
I think it's a trope that I'm not familiar enough with as like a consumer that I feel like I could throw it out there seamlessly, because I very much agree with you. It would be very delicate to not make it seem forced.
Sure. This particular trope, I don't actually think I've ever used it, because I think, like you were saying, Freeman, I'm a bit hesitant to do it. I feel like I probably wouldn't do it well. It's been done to me or to, a group I was in a few times. Jeff and I were both in an Eberron campaign a bunch of years, way back when Eberron first came out, where our one of the other party members, our friend Steve, his character Malefax had like a political rival that we fought a couple times, and we killed him every time. And he would just show up again, and eventually turns out, I don't know if he was a lich at the beginning or if he became a lich after being brought back to life a couple times. But at first, the trick in that case was that we had no reason to suspect he would come back. We killed him, and then, okay, it's done and over with. But then he comes back again, and then he comes back again. And I don't recall what his name was originally, but eventually we just referred to him as Won't Die.
It's bad that that's what stuck.
Yeah.
Not the actual name.
Right. Another trope that I really like is I like when the villain sees themselves as lawful good. Like when the villain is doing something that from their point of view, they are completely justified in doing.
Yeah.
Similarly, though, that's difficult to pull off because sometimes the players might be like, well, shoot, why are we fighting this guy? He actually did a good job of explaining his, why he's doing what he's doing. Right. Shoot, maybe I'm on his side now.
It's also easy to fall into that cliche of, morality is a human construct, and that's why I'm justified, and you're wrong and I'm right, but neither of us are wrong or right. And you're like, okay, that's just a bit boring. But
right, yeah, turn the game into debate club or something.
Right.
Sure. As far as that, though, like I honestly don't think I've used that one many times either, just because like the players, when you want the players to talk to the villain, they kill the villain. When you want the players to kill the villain, they talk to the villain.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I think an approach would be that can kind of help with any trope that you're looking to utilize is to make sure you have established like the motive behind these villains, and not only that, but maybe provide an opportunity for the players to learn it and understand it outside of speaking to the villain directly. Sure. So help them find a way to achieve perspective. Even though they're hunting down, they know it's the big bad. They know they got to take it down, and there's all these things that are hanging in the balance if they don't. But at least maybe they have a little more to go on, or a little more ready to converse when they reach that point, or whatever point they encounter this villain.
I like a villain that like assimilates people or things, like the Borg from Star Trek.
Yeah,
sure. Where if you don't defeat them, your ally might end up under their thrall later on. Like with hags, with mind flayers, you might see them. You might see someone that was your ally turned into, some sort of a pawn of theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's not just like you losing power; it's they're also gaining power. So like every person you lose is somebody that they gain. So like the White Walkers kind of thing. Where
sure.
It's just like like we lost half of our army to the White Walkers, and now the White Walkers have half of our army more, in their numbers.
Sure.
Yeah, I too love that trope, and it's a really good flavorful moment to give to your players, especially if they have a significant NPC that they've managed to over time create a bond with or have a connection with and really enjoy, and just see them fall, and not just fall, but sort of become assimilated or corrupted and suddenly become an enemy. And if you really want to push it, and this would very much depend on your players and what their preferences are. Some people hold their characters very close to their chest and don't want anything to change about them, especially after they die. But you can easily do that with a player character that has died or succumbs. And some players would really love that. I personally would really love that if one of my characters that got lost and then I encountered them again and they're no longer under my control, and I would love that. But not everyone's on board with that. So as much as I love that trope and that idea directly, make sure you always communicate with your players, just in case.
My brain just went spinning down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So okay, you have a setting where maybe this wouldn't be something that you would immediately tell the players. I don't know. We always try to say tell everything up front just so people aren't like. But I mean, I think this is one of those things. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. The idea would be that if a player's character dies, but then they bring it back with like a raise dead or spell or something, because like they might, maybe it's a group of players that don't want to reroll characters. They like their characters. They want to hold on to them, and even if they die, they're gonna the group is gonna do whatever they can to get that character back.
Yeah.
Have it be that like in this setting, in this world, raise dead spells like. Again, that I sort of went down a weird rabbit hole where when you raise somebody from the dead, it doesn't raise that body up. It kind of creates a new body.
Okay.
And the old one, and like the original body, I don't know, gets used gets used by the big bad evil force.
Sure.
I don't know. I just
it's
just trying to think like raise dead and resurrection spells in this world. Are basically like creating clones in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So with each one of these, I've been resisting the urge to bring up Mass Effect because I've recently started playing the Mass Effect series. I've never played any of the Mass Effect games until a couple months ago. One of our friend Steve that I mentioned earlier has been constantly trying to get me to play them, and I finally started to.
Yeah, I bought the Legendary Edition pretty quickly and played through the first two very quickly.
Yeah. I'm about halfway through the third one right now.
Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna spoil one of the optional quests in the third game. It's a really cool moment, so I'm hesitant to do so. But Freeman, do you mind if I spoil?
No, by all means, yeah.
Okay.
I've played them all a number of times, so yeah.
Sure. Well, so I'll also spoil the second game for anybody who hasn't played it. The second game in this series begins with the main character dying, and then they are like resurrected essentially by science or whatever. They're like,
they're scientifically reconstructed, if you will.
Yeah, something
by
like
science
that.
Or whatever.
Well, so there is a DLC mission in the third game, which is included in the Legendary Edition. There's a DLC mission where assassins start coming for you, and you eventually find out that the person who is trying to assassinate you is you. When they brought you back from the dead, they also made a bunch of, or they made at least one clone of you in case you needed like a spare heart or spare limb or something. And that clone ended up like breaking free or like developing its own personality. And now it's trying to take you out, because if you exist, then they're just a copy. But if they can kill you, then they will be the real Commander Shepard. So kind of similar to that. And I was resisting the urge to bring them up because like they're in the Mass Effect series, there's also the concept of indoctrination. There's this evil race of robotic alien beings that can like take over people's minds. And so a lot of the villains that you fight in the game are just indoctrinated slaves of these aliens. I was also thinking in my head, when a villain views themselves as the good guy or whatever, there is a character, it's not a villain, but there is a one of the good guys in Mass Effect 2 and 3 is kind of a genocidal murderer, in that he was part of this group that created this virus that would wipe out 99.99% of this one race of beings. And he's a good guy because the game does a lot of work to show you that he did what he did because at the time it was the right choice. He stands by that choice. However, he has never stopped. He's never viewed that as the end of the process. That was always one step. He's always been working on reaching the next step so that they can undo it and moving forward. So like that could have very easily been the villain that created this genocidal virus.
Right.
But instead, like, you don't have to agree with him, but he is given a lot of opportunity to explain, I know it was terrible. I have to be the one to undo this, because if someone else was in charge, they might not do it. They might not go to the next step. They would just leave it where it is.
It's very akin to Ozymandias from Watchmen, right? Like he knows he's doing this horrible, horrible thing, but he doesn't see it as I'm doing it just for the sake of doing it, but rather it's going to be the stepping stone to progress, to more peace, to a plan that I see that goes very, very far ahead. Yeah.
I know I said like I like it when the villain has like very understandable motives or whatever. I also love a villain that you don't know what the heck they even are. Something that is just so alien. You can't even tell like where their face is or what, if they understand the concept of life and death, who knows? Something that is just so alien to our understanding.
Yeah. That's the JRPG approach.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're just like you're in a void with some massive
embodiment of a concept.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're just like, okay. Well, when we defeat this thing, are we dead now? What's going on? I'm floating in an abyss.
No, because they killed the embodiment of death, so they aren't dead.
What even is Genova?
Exactly.
She's alien mommy.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the lesson here is that it's very easy to do this wrong. A lot of popular media has done it wrong. But, hey, when it's done right, maybe when it's not the big bad, but it's like one of the big, I don't know.
I wonder if the lesson here is that a villain trope is extremely difficult because of the dynamic nature of tabletop RPGs. In that because you kind of touched on it earlier, where if it's in a book, they can write it in this way and they can sort of just force it to happen. But you have players that have varying levels of how close to their chest they role play. Are they really trying their best to play a character that's not themselves, or are they just playing themselves? Like, how much are they metagaming on their own head? And every table's different, and every set of players and groups are different, and individuals are different, and that might be why it's so difficult to make these work out well, and why it's so true that it's easy to fail with villain tropes, because there's so much more to the process than just you writing the narrative and creating that trope. You never know. Like I always give the example of, like, you plan for a zig and then you plan for a zag and then you go, hold on. Can I think of a zog?
A zog.
There's got to be a zog. Is there a zog? Yeah. You know what? I think I came up with a zog. Okay. If I come up with a zog, I'm going to go with a zeg as well. Okay. I think I've got it. Okay, guys, here's the scenario. Yeah, we're going to zug. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't have sworn.
It's all right. I'll bleep it out. It's fine.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, you just don't know. So going with a villain trope maybe isn't what you should do.
Yeah, maybe. Or just be flexible. Maybe, like, you plan for one type of villain, but maybe the players will befriend them and now they're a different, I don't know. Maybe now they're an anti-hero. Who knows? So, yeah, I don't know. Just don't put all your eggs in one basket. If the campaign is undone by one thing, by one good argument, by one roll, by one whatever, it probably wasn't very good to begin with. So try and have the villain be more layered, have there be multiple villains, anything that makes it a little bit less vulnerable to just a single thing you didn't plan for.
For sure. Could anyone remind me what is Shrek? Is he a troll?
He is an ogre.
He's an ogre, yeah. So maybe just make an ogre your main villain, because apparently they have layers like an onion. Just call it a day.
There you go.
He's got to protect his swamp.
Exactly. Yeah. Keep it simple, but add depth to it. I don't know. That was terrible advice.
Add depth to the swamp, you mean? To make the swamp really deep?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Our next question comes from Freeman.
Whoa, who's that
guy?
This
was through email. And he asks, what mechanics would you borrow from other game systems? Why? And how do you keep or make them balanced?
Yeah. Freeman, do you have any things that come to mind?
Whoa. This is my question. You want me to answer
okay.
it? That's
fair
ridiculous.
enough.
No, I do have something. I do have something.
You want me to scan and bag my own groceries? What the?
No, I do have something, but I actually would like to hear what you guys have to say first, if that's okay.
Okay. Jeff, do you have anything off the top of your head? I've got a couple things.
Oof. I mean, there's definitely plenty I can get from other game systems, though. Ooh, because I can always think of something from, like, video games and stuff.
Yeah, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Go for
it. One of my very favorite video games is the Shadow of Mordor. There's a two game series.
Okay.
And they have the Nemesis system within that. Which is basically the game involves you're basically fighting a bunch of orcs, and there is a bit of like a hierarchy within the orcs. There's there's captains and war chiefs, and the idea is that like every single orc that you encounter has the chance of killing you, but you keep coming back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
But because that orc has killed you, it rises in ranks.
It levels up.
He levels up.
Yeah.
but each orc has a name, has like a personality, and has like its own like stats and class and sort of thing. So like, this orc grunt, maybe you got weakened by something or other, and an orc grunt just happened to have the killing blow on you. Now that orc is promoted to a captain, and now he's got a little bit more strength to him, but he also like remembers you and remembers how he killed you, and so he might taunt you because of that, or he might get a level up, he might get a power related to how he defeated you, or it could be the other way around where you wound them, they escape, and then they come back, and now they have that scar, and like maybe you burned them, so now he's got like a burn, his half of his face is burned, and so now he's afraid of fire. So if you throw fire at him, he's gonna run away again.
Yeah, that's the thing I was about to say is I love that system. I'm so glad you wrote that up. I never would have thought of that, but I love that if they do manage to escape from you and you had used fire on them, they come back with a fear of fire. And I think it works both ways as well. Whereas if they had defeated you, they gain something based around how they defeated you, and they get like a bonus from that. And adding to everything you said too, like they have their own sort of social connections, like rivalries with each other or alliances with each other, and they betray each other, and you're just sort of this thorn in everyone's side. And it's such a cool system. It's such a cool system. I think that's a really cool idea.
It's a lot of fun. Like I load that game up every once in a while just to play around in it, because the gameplay itself, it's fun, but like it's always that's like that sandbox of, or it's like that ripple effect where it's just like, I'm gonna go in and mess some stuff up and see what the orcs do. I mean, this kind of ties into the trope of the the reoccurring villain.
Oh, sure.
Where it is really difficult to pull off, because characters are just going to kill, players are going to kill the bad guys. So it's not going to, you can't really have a rival if they just kill them right away. I think what got this in my head recently was, I forget what it was. Our friend Jay had showed us a post on Twitter or something. It was somebody talking about a game system where the idea was your heroes just can't die unless they're being killed by the main villain or something like that. Right.
Yeah. Like during most scenarios, the hero isn't actually capable of death. They can only have setbacks or something.
Right.
Okay.
Unless they're doing something that is against their nemesis, basically.
Right. So I forget the name of that system and the name of the poster on it. I'd have to go. I have to look back.
I'll try to see if I can find it and put it in the show notes.
It basically got me the idea of it's like, okay, that'd be really cool if there was a system in the game that made it so along with levels or challenge ratings or something like that, there might be a sort of villain hero tier. So if you're 2 steps ahead in the tiers of hero versus the villain, you can actually kill them. Whereas if you're more evenly matched, you might not be able to kill each other outright.
Sure.
I don't know. I was trying to figure out maybe if there is a way to implement something like a nemesis system where in a first level adventure, say a goblin scout isn't going to be able to kill your character. But that goblin's captain might, and maybe, or if that one of those scouts manages to escape, he might go up a level in the nemesis system to the point where okay, maybe next time you find he comes across you again, he might be able to kill you because now he knows how you can fight or something. It feels like it'd be really hard to actually implement and be a lot of work on the DM side to keep track of all that, but.
Now, my head's now moving in a direction that steers away from games like 5e and Pathfinder and into systems that are more based on, strict roleplay and fewer mechanics and and a lot of yes-anding. So I've been looking a lot lately at Blades in the Dark. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one.
I've heard of it. I've never played it.
Yeah, it's a very yes-and sort of system, especially from the GM side. And it's reasonably simple to sort of get your head around on character builds, but it's a very Dishonored setting. I don't know if you've played the Dishonored games by Arcane Studios, but it's very Victorian steampunk kind of idea, and you sort of have to deal with stress. And you have to deal with vices with your characters, and you have to relieve stress. And you as you do these things, and you sort of live and work and play in this really gritty city. So my brain here is at this more political intrigue approach, using the nemesis system as a baseline instead of constant violent aggressors like goblins or orcs, but rather the moving parts of a city or a sort of political community, and in a system like that, it sort of plays against you in that you're very likely to slowly hit a point where your character is not playable anymore. And whether that's because they died, or they lose their mind from too much stress, or they even take the fall, which is, I think, is like a thing in the game. You take the fall and you go to prison to, like, on behalf of your group, to sort of lower everyone's heat, they call it, from the local authorities. And the whole idea is to be sort of the underground villains and rogues, if you will. And I just love the idea of that nemesis system working in that fashion, where, your character might finally take the fall or be killed, or, kind of lose touch with reality. And it means you as a group are defeated, and therefore so-and-so gets a promotion. And they move up in the political and social world, and your narrative and your goals start to expand as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So before we move on, but I did manage to find that tweet that Jay had sent us. So the game system is 7th Sea.
Okay.
Which Jay described. It's like it's just a more story focused game, where it's like you have crazy big action and stuff like that. But the little blurb that was on the tweet, I want to read it, is random events can't kill heroes, otherwise their deaths would have no meaning. Heroes die on deathbeds, surrounded by friends and family, or they die kicking on the end of a villain's blade just within the sight of other heroes, who then purchase the villain as a revenge story. Villains are the only ways that hero can die in 7C. They can't die after falling off balconies. They can't die in burning houses. They can't die from the plague. Only a villain can kill a hero. That's a deliberate choice on our part, and the reason is because in stories, death is too significant for it to be an accident.
Yeah.
And like nothing hurts more than playing a character you love that died because you rolled a 1 jumping over a river or something.
I love that. I remember when that tweet came out, I read a bunch of the comments, and so many people were just like, well, but then players can just do anything if there's no chance of them dying. And it's like, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Yes, this is going to be a different type of game if your players are just trying to push the boundaries of what their character can survive. Yes, it's going to be a weird fit for that game. That's not a problem.
Yeah, and that whole thing is what sparked me on the Nemesis system thing, because it's like okay, if only villains can kill heroes, then maybe only heroes can kill villains, and like what makes it a villain versus just like a henchman, or like what makes it a hero instead of just like a normal adventurer.
Sure.
It's like maybe you start off as a lowly adventurer, but eventually you become the hero. So like while you're at a lowly adventurer, a villain can kill you easily. But maybe like just like a orc captain can also kill you, even though he's not super high up in the rankings. But because you're just a level 1 adventurer, yeah, he can kill you.
So if there was some sort of like rank of importance that like only someone this many ranks above you can kill you.
So it sort of depends who you designate as a villain and what tiers you have, right?
Sure.
I admittedly, I get why that sort of lashback would have been there. It is a bit of a good point that but personally, I kind of love an unceremonious death.
True.
Obviously, I don't think it should be all the time, and if it is, like said, jumping over a river and then the luck of the dice means they drown, that's kind of lame, but I kind of picture the epic moments having more significance because you have the less epic ones, the ones that are so fast and so sudden and unpredictable and have almost no meaning, and you suddenly just snuffed out, and there's this sense of brutal reality and verisimilitude, depending on the world you're working in, that kind of adds to that. So when you have that big, beautiful hero moment and hero death, I feel like those little ones, those really, really, really unclassy ones, kind of punctuate them a bit, at least for me.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's basically just a difference in play style, and it sounds like 7th Sea are just saying this is the one type of play style that we wanted our game to be for.
Yeah.
And I can understand some people just never having played or thought to play that type of game being just kind of like, well, what's even the point? So
I totally get it. Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's great, especially to stick to your guns like that and be like, this is the one we're going to do. It's different than the usual, but we're going to do it, and we're just putting it out there. Here's our cards are on the table. Like it or leave it, I respect that tremendously.
Sure. I think that going, just briefly staying on the video game topic, I guess, I think that it would be really interesting to play a tabletop RPG that explicitly had a respawn mechanic. If there was that, you can die. Yeah, you can die, no problem. You'll come back. But then what effect does that have on the world? Either you could play in a game where, for whatever reason, you just keep coming back and everybody's freaked out by you're this person that keeps dying and coming back. Or every time you die, you come back like at the beginning of that day. So if you die, you have some of the knowledge of what's going to happen, but nobody else does. Nobody knows that you keep coming back because to them, you haven't. I think that I've talked in the past about like, if you could make a tabletop RPG out of Dark Souls, which is a game about you keep dying, but you keep getting up and trying again. So it would be interesting to play a game, maybe not necessarily just a combat-based game, combat-focused game, because that could get a little boring because combat takes a while in D&D and such. But if it was like, let's say it was a murder mystery or something where you can gain all of this knowledge everybody else doesn't have because you can die and start the day over again or something. I think that could be interesting. But you'd kind of have to build the game around it. Otherwise, it would be unbalanced. You'd be able to kill anything if given enough time.
You sort of hit another point that I had in the back of my head. I wasn't sure if I was going to bother bringing it up, but I might as well. In reference to what you said, Jeff, with like a PC or an NPC dying and then being raised by a raised dead or whatever, and then manipulated by the big bad. It made me think of in some systems. I don't know if it's in 5e now. I know it's in Pathfinder, at least first edition, the reincarnation spell, where you can come back to life, but you kind of have to roll on a table to see how and in what circumstances you do come back. And I love this idea of like maybe you have this world where you have this. Is it miasma? Miasma? I never remember how to say that word.
Miasma.
Miasma, yeah.
Miasma.
Yeah. But yeah, if you have this sort of constantly permeating miasma that allows for this constant reincarnation for select people. And so here you could definitely start to employ this nemesis system in that regard, and you have the same personality if the player chooses to continue on, but every time they die, probably make it a bit of a higher danger kind of world. They can come back as a new race or ancestry and or even class if you want. And that way they can cycle the same character, but, continue to utilize different mechanics and different approaches while attacking the same enemies that have been promoted as a result and have gained new abilities, and kind of mix those that sort of reincarnation into both sides of it.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. So going with other RPG systems, you got to say, I got to say that there's a lot of stuff that 4th edition D&D did that I think 5th edition D&D could really benefit from. You mentioned earlier, Matt Colville. Matt Colville has at least one video about specifically this. I know he's talked about the minion system as being something that was really good that 4th edition did, that 5th edition could benefit from. It's basically just, there are certain enemies that only have 1 hit point.
Right.
If you hit them, they die. I've utilized these in games before to great effect. I know a lot of other DMs have. It's a real simple, rather than being like, okay, well, is this minion dead? No, this minion still has 5 hit points left or whatever.
Right.
Let's just have them be dead.
You basically just throw in Star Trek red shirts into the mix, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So minions is one thing from 4th edition. Another one is skill challenges. I've talked about skill challenges many times. Crit Academy has a great supplement on DM's Guild about skill challenges. It's basically like you have an encounter that is just skill checks. You have to succeed on a certain number of skill checks before you fail a certain number of skill checks. And there are, depending on the situation, there are certain skill checks that are the assumed or presented ones, but then players can suggest other skills too, but those ones might have a higher DC. Maybe a specific skill automatically works, but only counts once. Or maybe one skill check, if you succeed, doesn't actually count as a success, but opens up another skill to be used that can be you can gain successes from that. So it's kind of just like a more complicated way and a more nuanced way of dealing with skill checks instead of just being, okay, I'm going to try to disable his trap. Okay, I succeeded. It's like, all right, well, you can use this skill check. You can use this skill check. You can use this skill check. If you fail 3 of these, the trap goes off. But if you succeed on 6 of them, and you can use, you can use whichever skills you're best at, you can use this other thing, whatever. It makes skill checks more involved and just, in my opinion, a lot cooler.
Yeah.
So minions, skill challenges, and the bloodied condition is another one. It's just a condition that gets applied whenever you're at half health. In 4th edition, certain things would go off when you got to half health. Maybe a dragon would immediately use its breath weapon when it got to half health. Maybe as a player, you had a thing that gave you regeneration, but only worked while you were below half health, or something like that. So those are 3 things from 4th edition that I think were really good. They could pretty much be brought over whole hog. I don't think there would have to be much that would need to be changed.
I have to interject just for a sec, because if my partner and co-host in Encounter This, James, was here instead of me, he would have brought all 3 of those up before you.
Yep.
Because you hit those 3. I was like, is he going to say bloodied? I was sitting here waiting for it, and you said it. I don't know if you saw it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you said bloodied. Because that's so exactly what James, he loves those mechanics. The minions, the skill challenges, the bloodied condition. He's a big proponent. He's definitely mentioned them on Encounter This a number of times, I'm quite sure.
I'm sure he has.
Yeah. But anyway, continue.
As for a couple other non-D&D RPGs, one that comes to mind, I always have to bring up the Terrible RPG. Freeman, if you've never heard of the Terrible RPG, it's TEAR, Terrible.
Okay.
The idea is that you have a sheet of paper. You can choose 6 skills for your character that are, relevant to the setting and style of the game. And so you write out the 6 skills on the sheet of paper. And then anytime you want to do something that has a chance of failure, you have to tear off part of your sheet that both is big enough, has to cover a 1-inch square, and also has to contain 1 letter of the skill you're using. We've done the Terrible RPG a couple times for this podcast. We did one for our Halloween actual play 2 years ago. We also did it for this year. So anybody who is still a $1 patron on our Patreon right now will get that probably by the time this episode goes out. So we've used that a couple times, and I really like it specifically because everything is a consumable. There is a definite limit to how long the game can go. Mm-hmm. So if you're running a one-shot, it's not going to go on forever, because eventually you're not going to have any sheet left. You still have to keep tearing stuff off to use it. Mm-hmm. You can keep on making checks all you want, but there is a limit to how many times you can do it. So you might have to weigh, do I want to try this, or do I want to just play it safe and not attempt anything extraordinary?
Yeah. That puts me in mind of another mechanic from Blades in the Dark, actually. Sure. And something that I'm fascinated by, because I, as a player, really, really hate shopping. Okay. I hate skimming through all of the items lists and that sort of thing, and like finding the best items and doing what I can with my money. I find it very tedious. I don't even like going to the store to buy t-shirts, let alone in my fantasy setting. Like, I can't stand the idea of shopping. So yeah. What's really cool, Blades in the Dark, it's so much more loosey-goosey too when it comes to actual items lists. But what you do is when you go out on a mission per se, I forget what they call them, but you choose the size of the load you're carrying. That's what you do. Okay. And so it's a light, medium, or heavy load or something like that. And then that has an effect on, your character's attributes, I believe. So the heavier the load, maybe the slower you move or something. But a lot of this game is very theater of the mind. So what you do is you decide in the moment what's in your inventory, if it's applicable. So it assumes you planned ahead of time. So you're like, oh, we need to scale this wall. I need a grappling hook. Okay, well, I chose a medium load. What's a grappling hook worth? So it might have an item list that tells you what amount of that load is. Say a medium load that offers you 5 points, and a grappling hook costs you 2, something like that. And then if it's not on the list, then the GM just sort of decides for you. And so you can sort of just do this retroactive choosing of your inventory to suit the need and moment, with this constant assumption that you did your research and planned ahead, even if you didn't role play it. And the same thing actually happens with, you have these things called flashbacks. I don't know if they're called flashbacks, but you have these things. It's akin to the same system where you find yourself at a checkpoint that no one thought, no one knew was coming up, but you can choose to take some stress and do a flashback and go converse with someone and grease a palm to get some fake identification. And that costs you something, but you can do it in the moment. So these sort of assumed retroactive things to use. It's a really, really cool idea. I love it.
That's really cool. I feel like I've seen a couple games done that were like heist based. And in those you could similarly be like, oh, I need this thing. Let's do a flashback to show how I got it and why I would have it. Or how I set it up ahead of time.
Actually, I think that's what it's called. I said mission, but I'm pretty sure they're called heists. So yeah, that's perfect.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There is in Pathfinder 2E, there's a feat that basically, I think it's like once per day, it allows you to be like, oh wait, no, I have this thing.
Oh yeah.
And then you would just like deduct whatever it cost from whatever, the amount of gold you have. But the idea is like anything from just like the, generic gear list, you can say that you have it. And you like, it's like, oh yeah, no, I bought this from the store before we left today.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. I almost feel like that's should be a thing you can just do. Cause I mean, everybody's going to forget what stuff they were supposed to anyway.
Right. Prescient Planner. Is the feat.
Now, two more things that come to mind, and these are both from GURPS. The only time I've ever played GURPS was like 20 years ago or something. And so I most of what I know from GURPS is from listening to the film Reroll. But two things that come to mind. One is called Extra Effort. And that is anytime you're making a skill check or whatever, or making an attack, anytime you're doing something that is like physical in some way, I think that the GM always has like they can say whether they would allow it or not. But when you're doing something where you could like push yourself beyond your normal limits, you make an additional check. You make like a Constitution check basically. And then if you succeed, you can give yourself a bonus on the check you're going to make, but it essentially costs you hit points. Okay. So like, you're like, I really need to break open these. I need to pull these metal bars open.
Yeah.
I'm going to extra effort it. So you make a Constitution check. If you succeed, you can spend some hit points in order to give yourself a bonus on your strength check. I think that's cool. D&D doesn't really have anything like that. It's basically just, you either succeed or you don't.
Yeah, they don't have a whole lot of mechanics that are costly to you. Yeah. The worst you get is that costs you a spell slot.
Sure.
Right.
And then similarly, when you're making an attack in GURPS, there are certain modifiers you can give yourself. Again, I'm not super familiar with the system. I just know what I've heard on this other podcast. You could, let's say you want to go all out and you're going to say like, I'm going to go all out strong. And what that means is you're going to do extra damage if you hit. However, your chance to dodge is either lessened or taken away entirely. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm going to go all out strong, but that means if anybody tries to attack me, I don't get a chance to dodge. They just, because GURPS has like, if you roll to hit, they can then roll to dodge. They wouldn't get that. So in D&D, maybe it would be like you take a penalty to your AC in order to do more damage. But you don't have to do more damage. You could say, I'm going to take this penalty to my AC to instead be more accurate. Or, hey, I'm going to spend 2 rounds aiming to make myself more accurate. There's all these little things you can do to spend either your dodge chance or spend actions or whatever in order to make your attacks more accurate, more damaging, more, I don't know, whatever other modifiers you can do. I just like how there are things that you can do in GURPS that modify your actions, modify your skills, your attacks. D&D has a couple of these, but they always require feats.
Yeah, and this sounds like a more dynamic and certainly universal version of the barbarian's reckless attack. Essentially,
Sure,
I can give myself advantage, but I will have advantage against me until the next turn. Essentially, especially in that strength example. So yeah, I see where you're going with that though, because I was about to say, oh, you be careful because you could almost make reckless attack feel like it's not important if everyone can kind of do it, but you're right in that you could just apply that to so many other things, and just sort of keep it dynamic and varied.
Like, I remember when Pathfinder first came out, Pathfinder First Edition, they put in the idea, was that Pathfinder? Was it Pathfinder where you could they put in a called shots mechanic? Or am I thinking of something else?
Oh, it rings a bell, but I'm not sure.
There was some supplement that came out late 3rd edition, early 3.5, whatever, where there were modifiers that anybody could give to attack an eye, to blind someone, or to cut off their hand or whatever. And those sorts of things, the trick is making them balanced, because if it's easy to blind someone, everyone is going to be trying to blind all the time. Really, you should be assuming your character is always trying to cut off their head or cut off their hand or whatever. So how do you make it so that it is not easier than just attacking, but also not so hard nobody ever does it?
Right.
That's a tricky thing.
That is a tricky thing, and that's usually comes down to the math, I would say.
Yeah.
And math has never been my forte when it comes to these games,
Sure.
despite my apparent want for complication and depth. And the old adage, it's not really Pathfinder; it's more like Mathfinder. But, I'm eternally grateful that Second Edition pared down some of the math, although there's still plenty involved.
There's still a bunch of math.
Yeah, there's still loads of math. I'm also extremely happy about the invention of virtual tabletops, so that the math can be done for me.
There you go.
Yeah.
I talked to, again, Gabe off mic a little bit about this, just because I happened to be listening to the most recent episode of InterPartyConflict today as much as I could. And not to mention, I checked out the treatise on trolls that you did, I think it was in April, that you had told me to give a listen as well. And
I just thought that episode was the closest to what you guys do on
Sure, yeah. And it was great. I loved it. I loved the whole premise that you started with, a meme that sort of formed into a debate, shall we call it? And then you were like, I've got to sort this out, and you just did a big deep dive on what is and is not considered a magical creature, and I thought it was really fun. And so, but it just because of all those things you and in particular the previous episode, and you mentioned from yet another one previous before, the sort of brokenness of the 5e passive perception, and what one of the elements of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, we talked about this, that is one of my absolute favorite pieces, is how that is utilized, that passive idea is utilized as passive DCs for everything your character has, especially when it comes to a skill base. So your survival has a 10 plus passive. Your nature has a 10 plus passive, and they are set in stone in that way to represent your character's build and what they have. So they are essentially a defense against people trying to overpower you on those topics in some way.
There might be a situation where someone is making a perception check versus your passive stealth.
Right. And then vice versa, of course, too. You doing a stealth check versus someone's passive perception. And even going a little bit further, where Second Edition has these, and if I think First Edition did as well, maybe 3 and 3.5 did, I can't quite remember, but these sort of more active universal skills, like I want to demoralize that target. Yeah. And so you make an intimidation check, but it's against their will DC, which would be the equivalent of, say, a 5e, a wisdom DC. And a wisdom saving throw DC, and I just love that. Like you're utilizing all of these parts of your character in a passive way at all times, and it works really well in my mind. Simply because the more I've utilized it, the more I've come to despise contested checks.
Okay.
So take, for example, I'm going to try and grapple this creature. It's usually, I believe in 5e, the rules are it's a contested athletics check. You roll, I roll, whoever rolls the highest wins. But if you have a halfling wizard that is fortunate enough to have a +1 to their strength or their athletics, and you have a Goliath barbarian that has a +8 to their athletics, one of them still got a roll, and it's very likely that the one with the higher is going to the one with the higher bonus is going to succeed over the other one. But if you do contested checks, that likelihood of that +8 succeeding significantly drops, because you are leaning on the luck of 2 different rolls as opposed to the ability of either of those creatures. So it's actually way more likely than it should be, in my opinion, that halfling wizard could actually grapple that barbarian, instead of, they aren't really playing against that +8 like they should be in a sense that makes it seem realistic to me. And more importantly, it makes that character build significant at all. It almost pulls the significance of the foundation away from me. And so that's why I really love that passive. I don't know how it would fit into 5e, if it would work out in that math. 5e is not known for its mathematical balance. I think we probably all know that. But it's a very simple background, under the radar idea that I have completely fallen in love with. That being said, one of my very good friends, who's an avid 5e guy, hates anything to do with math whatsoever. So I could even convince him, even though it's only 10 plus. It really depends. It's a very, very playstyle preference based idea for sure.
I remember back in 4th edition, there was a build that I saw for a specific type of character that like 90% of their effectiveness in battle did not require rolls. They were a warlord, which was the class that was like all about giving other players buffs, giving other players extra attacks, extra movement. And so there was a specific build I saw where it did not matter whether you succeeded on any of your rolls, you were still doing your job most of the time.
Crazy. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
So what you were saying for this one was essentially more passives, like more varied passives.
Oddly enough, yeah. So despite the fact that there's a sort of brokenness in what you guys had mentioned about what Jeremy Crawford had
it's
right?
Specifically with how 5th edition uses passives and how Jeremy Crawford has clarified passives. When we originally covered a long time ago, I don't have a problem with passive perception as a concept. I use something very similar in my own games. It's how it's presented, how it is a stated part of the rules, how they use passives. That's the problem.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with how Pathfinder does it, because it's always a roll versus a passive, not just like, okay, is your passive high enough to see this trap that I put, knowing what your passive was? Okay, your passive is high enough. Your passive against its passive is always, whatever. I don't want to rehash that, but I don't have a problem with passives as a rule. So using passives more and using them differently, I think, could really help.
Right. And they just need to make more sense and have a more give and take kind of approach. Even though they're passive,
definitely,
there needs to be a give and take. They don't have to be active to have a give and take. They just need to have a solid role. And to make it a little bit more universal across all of the skills that your character has, rather than just, taste, sight, smell, hearing, it just makes more sense to have everything fleshed out in that same regard, because they've trained for this. They are, gearing towards these specialties and avoiding other ones. And that's how you create the balance of the party. So, yeah.
All right. So I think that'll do it for our regular questions for today. But we do still have our social media questions. Our last social media question was, what is your favorite type of dungeon? Freeman, do you have a favorite type of dungeon?
Oh, that's a good question. I like one that is filled with decaying instruments and technology. And I love the idea of encountering an old, degraded, from ancient civilization kind of concept where, I mean, I guess it's likely to be underground in a cave sort of structure, but
Sure.
I love the idea of discovering old technology that may or may not be common, but is, at least if it is common already, it's a variant on it, like an old version, an old blueprint version of what is more familiar and utilized now, or something that was well ahead of its time and you don't see anymore. I love that sort of thing. I love exploring a dungeon that has a history that is not obvious, and you have the opportunity to gain snippets of it, but you can never really gain all of it. So you have to fill in the blanks yourself, and that really gets your imagination going and your creativity going by having little pieces, and you're trying to fit them together. And you may never get those filler spots, but you can do it yourself. And I just find that really fun.
Cool. Jeff, do you recall what your answer was?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I kind of have to go with what Freeman said there too. Like that is a really cool setting for a dungeon, because like I think what I had said last time was basically I like overgrown ruins.
Yeah.
Or like something like, what I was picturing was the the Mayan pyramids or something like that. There was an old point and click adventure game called Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders for anybody who knows that one. Where part of it does take you into like a Mayan pyramid like temple something or other, and you're kind of like you're walking around in the dark. You're using like a lighter to light your way, so it's just as silly, but it's just like you have to go through a jungle to find it, and it's all like covered in vines and trees and stuff like that. And like I like that kind of setting, but I do like the finding ancient ruins, but then within them like you got like the precursor to I don't know, maybe you stumble upon like some tablets that have like really old versions of spells or something like that. Like maybe this is the temple where the first fireball spell was made or something crazy like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I love that.
Oddly enough, the whole dungeon is all covered in scorch marks.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's just like,
what is all this scoring as we dive deeper?
The surrounding area is like very lush plant life because the soil had so much like ash and stuff mixed into it or something like that.
Okay.
And like maybe they like, it looks like the soil is very similar to that of like near a volcano or something, but there's not a volcano for miles. Like what is up with that? And it's like, it's because they were setting off fireballs.
Yeah, you get this really great moment where you have, people, you walk into this unbelievably massive underground cavern, and you roll the right check to realize that the cavern is almost too circular. And
right.
You're like, and then someone's got to piece it together. Like, oh my God, an explosion created this in some way, and this is it almost would create this unsettling feeling. Like, what are we into here?
Strangely, all of the trees are leaning away from
right
the central point.
Yeah.
I think I said either like a crypt or a tomb. There's like a good old fashioned crypt.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I think about it, one of my favorite adventures ever is the Whispering Cairn from the Age of Worms, and that is exploring a crypt, exploring a tomb that has hidden passageways, and the tomb isn't actually, you actually have to find the secret tomb or behind the real tomb and so on.
Which I think isn't that like, it's like the tomb of a lost civilization, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Brought them all together.
Yeah.
So I love a good tomb. So we didn't really get very many responses to this. And actually, something I should probably address, I think something is wrong with our Facebook page, because for a few weeks now, I've been unable to view the posts that I've put on there. And I thought it was just me. I thought everybody else was still accessing it just fine. And it turns out, no, nobody else is accessing it either. So that's probably why we didn't get any responses on Facebook. I will try to fix that by the time this episode goes out.
No, that's Mark Zuckerberg's job.
Yeah, I guess.
I'll call him up.
Call him that favor.
So none on Facebook. We got one on Reddit. Alistar the Minotaur says, a while back in the post-apocalyptic game I'm currently running, I ran a dungeon that was an abandoned hospital/biological research facility. Any weird chimera-esque amalgam I could think of, I was able to put in it. Plus, each different ward of the hospital added different challenges. The psych ward had some very big, very angry zombies, and oddly enough, my players refused to go into the pediatric wing. Wonder why that was. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep.
And then we got just a few on the Discord. There was actually quite a bit of off-topic discussion on this one. Stilton Koopo 84 says, I love the Zelda dungeon. Bring on the puzzles.
Sure.
Collins B says, the classic dungeon that is not a dungeon, where it has all the trappings of a dungeon, but with a different setting like sewer, mansion, Lich Run Casino, etc. The more ridiculous, the better.
Lich Run Casino is great.
I want to go to a Lich Run Casino. I'm going to say that right now. I didn't realize casino was one of the options.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Deborah Soar says, the ones where you have to try and find your way out, because how did you even get in here? The Beverage Tea says, two very different types. Those with tight theming and one or two types of monsters that lead to a specific goal, room, or big bad evil guy, and its polar opposite, one that changes theming with each new room. All kinds of baddies and no purpose other than to explore. For example, of what I'm not that into is the Sunless Citadel in Tales of the Yawning Portal. Two different factions leading to a third connected end goal. There's nothing inherently bad about it. It just doesn't float my boat. Yeah, I can understand that. MRV73 says, ones that reveal some deep world lore or expand a horizon to a new mystery. That's pretty cool. So like if you find ancient technology that sort of recontextualizes what you thought of the past or something.
Right.
And then Autumn Wind says, I'm not sure I like dungeons much at all. I would love a political intrigue or murder mystery, though. Dungeons tend to be combat focused and enclosed spaces. In combat, my characters tend to be about mobility or back row people. I don't want to be caught with nowhere to run.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I get that.
That reminds me of something I recently did or ran. I was playing Starfinder for a little over a year. And we finished in April, I think it was. And we ran through two shorter adventure paths that Paizo had produced. And in the midst of, at the end of chapter 2 of 3 of the second one, they fought one of the big bads. And I was just using the map given to me. And it was extremely tight quarters. And the fight was way less wonderful and very unceremonious compared to what I expected. And then I was scanning through the book and found a piece of artwork that displayed that combat in a massive cavern with all of this space and these like different tiers of levels and stuff. And I went, why the heck did they make the map so tiny? That fight would have been so much better in a massive room. They even depicted it in this beautiful artwork. It was amazingly well done. Yeah. And I just got really, really annoyed. It's like, wow, that could have been so much better. It hadn't occurred to me at the time that it should be because I was just working with what I was given. And so I love that idea. I love that dungeon idea. Like big open spaces are too few and far between in most of these dungeon adventures, I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like D&D and Pathfinder are largely designed for relatively close spaces. Like there isn't really much. The game kind of doesn't work as well when it is over longer distances. Mm-hmm. There's like, okay, well, everything within 30 feet is one thing. Everything within like 50 feet is another. Then it's basically just everything after that is kind of in its own tier. So yeah, the game could use a little bit more work on just longer range stuff. Yeah.
I will say that every 2 weeks we play Rime of the Frost Maiden. And I'm a player in that. And there are lots of inter-narrative like random encounters that can kind of happen that we've come across anyway. My co-host James is the DM for that one, so I don't know how much he plays with it, but we have all of these awesome moments where we're just in a stretch of white snow in this massive map, and we have to like fight a few things or one large thing or something, and it breaks up the monotony of fighting in tiny spaces, just having them appear as we travel, and it's actually really fun. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that was our last social media question. Our next social media question is, what was the most memorable villain you've encountered in a game, and what made them so memorable? One that comes to mind for me, we talked earlier about like having villains, escape or whatever, like having recurring villains is a difficult thing to do. One of the most memorable fights I've ever had was in a 4E game. I've talked about my character Artemis Red Sleeves in the past. That character he was just a human fighter. I didn't really have any sort of lofty goals for him other than just he wanted to be a knight and so on and so on. But that all changed about halfway through the campaign when he died. He died in the fight with the big bad of the campaign, who had infiltrated the party as a party member for a couple sessions. The DM had worked with one of the players to play with us for a couple sessions as this new character. We thought the character was just like a little kid. He eventually turned out he was a warlock. He had like magic powers, and we thought, oh, he's just a kid with magic powers, whatever. And then that player was running late one day, so we went into the dungeon without him, and then the player showed up right when we got to the main encounter, because the DM had told him, okay, they're about to do the main encounter, go ahead and come in now. Mm-hmm. And turned out he was the villain, and the DM had given him instruction, kill one player and then leave. That was his goal for the battle. And there were other enemies too. It wasn't just him. He killed one player, Jeff. He killed our friend Jamie's character. Oh. And that was all he was supposed to do. But my character charged after him as he was leaving. And so he gave just like one parting shot as he teleported away. And that parting shot killed my character. Oh. So that's memorable. It's memorable, number one, because he got away. That, it made me so angry. Number two, memorable because something monumental happened to my character, which then kind of completely changed the trajectory I had for that character, because he did come back from the dead, but I wasn't okay with there not being ramifications for him coming back from the dead. I decided this is going to affect him in some terrible way. And that it just changed the entire plan I had for the character in the best way possible.
I honestly, I don't think I have an answer for this one.
That's fine.
Because I've been so back and forth with my play as a player or as a GM, and sadly, not many have come to the end, right? And
sure.
Playing Starfinder, we had a lot of fun off and on, but ultimately, it was a long lesson of learning what not to do with certain complicated systems rather than what worked, sure. What really did work. And I really had hoped some of the villains I was running, resonated, but we just had a bit more complication with the complication of the system, and some players getting past it. So it didn't really resonate in the way that I had imagined. However, I do have one really, really dumb story. In that, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but in my hometown with a certain group of friends in a place I used to work, my nickname is Barn. I am known as the Barn, or just Barn, and it's a very nonsensical nickname. There's no story that's appropriate for the airwaves or even interesting, but I am the Barn. Anyway, I moved to the West Coast and went home for a visit one time, and one of my friends was running this homebrew D&D campaign. And he was driving me somewhere as I arrived, probably from the airport or something, and we came up with an idea of me joining the session for one. And I hid in one of the rooms in his apartment as all of the players arrived. All of them know who I was, and they all sat down. They all started the session. We had planned the whole thing. And at one point I snuck out of the room, and I'm now like just around the doorway with no door on it, and I'm just waiting for my cue. And he basically made them all encounter, like almost flip over to the ethereal plane and encounter a phantasmal barn that had a series of ethereal and incorporeal farm animals that they had to fight that I basically co-DM'd with him. And so I had to walk into the room and be like, I am the Phantom Barn, and I just kept screaming Phantom Barn all the time, and everyone was like keeling over laughing, and just they didn't know I was even home for a visit. So it was this great surprise and just play on my nickname, and just it was such a big laugh. So there, I played my own favorite villain, I guess.
There you go. Hey, it works.
Nice.
Jeff, did you have a favorite, a most memorable villain?
Most memorable? I mean, like the one I remember the most, is Kios from the Age of Worms.
Sure.
Just because it was such a big deal, because like he's a big bad evil guy. He was a god, or he was a deity or whatever. Although, but one that we do bring up is Won't Die.
True. Yeah.
That's one that I don't always remember him, but when I do remember, it's a pretty fond memory of like, oh yeah, like that guy who just kept coming back. What's his deal? Like what's going on?
That was kind of the campaign of goofy names because nobody could remember names. Right. Won't Die was recurring villain, was one of the recurring villains. New Guy was Jeff's cohort.
Yeah, my cohort, because he was the new guy of the group. So
and even your character's name is Walking Stick because Jay gave you a silly name. Jay gave you a name, and I was like, no, I don't like that name. I'm calling you Walking Stick. And it stuck. Because Jeff was playing a Warforged, and so I decided, no, my character is just going to call him Walking Stick, because Warforged tend to be named after objects. So
didn't you just like look at your character sheet? And
I did. I had Walking Stick written as my first weapon because I had a quarterstaff.
Reminds me of a short campaign I ran in Australia, and we had a guy join in shortly after we had started, and he thought he had this great idea to have a nameless character. He's like, and he introduces him. He's like, you can call me whatever you want because I have no name. And I just rolled my eyes, and I knew exactly what happened. Everyone just like, okay, hey, No Name. That became his new name, right? No Name. And I was like, how did you not see that coming, you fool?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for our questions for today. But before we close out, let's wind down. Let's relax. Let's take a deep breath. Let's remember those who have come before us, who have given their lives that we may have a better world to live in, as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. So today's funeral pyre is actually from Freeman. Freeman, take the floor.
Thank you very much. It's never easy to talk about the death of a character. Or is it?
I don't know. Sometimes it is. No, sometimes it's hilarious.
That's not true. My co-host James, he keeps a file specifically for the characters he's killed. Yeah. as a point of pride.
So he's
especially
that
in 5e,
kind of DM.
It's really hard to kill a character in 5e, so he's especially proud of them. I've got a couple. My very first character death was sort of on purpose. I had planned with James as the DM ahead of time that I wanted my character to die, but we agreed that I would never know when it came. So it was a very he actually tried to kill me deliberately outside of the normal bounds of combat a few times, but I just kept saving. And he was like, he just tried really hard, and he just kept saving. And eventually, I succumbed to a very, very vicious assassination arrow. And the only reason I really died was because one of the newer players foolishly pulled the arrow from the back of my neck.
Oh, boy.
Which made me automatically lose an extra death saving throw, essentially, because you don't do that. That's a bad idea, right? So it became very dramatic, and it was really, really fun. It was the first character death that this whole group had experienced. Literally everyone. It was our first campaign, and it was very dramatic and semi pre-scripted, but in a way that really resonated with the whole group, and it was just really, really fun. I don't remember all of the nitty-gritty details, but that was my very first character death. It was kind of pre-planned, but it really worked well for the narrative that was being told, at least what I recall. So it was really cool. But from there, the two that really stand out for me are it's the two character deaths. My first two character deaths, essentially, and they were through our Starfinder campaign. And so I'm GMing, and the first one was a big bad at the end of the first part of the adventure, and a very long fall, essentially. Just before the big bad was able to go down, he managed to shove one of the characters off. I think it was a 170-foot drop or something like that. Oh, and on the interior of a massive asteroid, and the player had to do the math a couple times because there was massive damage rules involved in Starfinder and Pathfinder, and he at first said, "Oh no, I'm dead right away," and we're like, "Really?" And then he's like, "Wait, hold on. Oh no, I'm just barely alive." We're like, "Oh, oof. Okay." And then we started doing a couple more rounds. He was like, "Guys, I'm really sorry. I just did the math one more time. It's exactly the amount required to kill me instantly, like to the number." And everyone kind of froze, and I was like, "Oh man, did this really just happen?" And they finished the combat out pretty quickly, and everyone doubled down on the role play so well, so hard that pretty much all of us were tearing up. And it was the end of the adventure, and I just dove into this sort of improvised narrative of how it's all gonna come to an end. And everyone just they played their characters in such a good way that it just rocked their characters that it was the first and only death that they had seen, of someone that was so important in the gameplay. And it was just so cool. And then fast forward further into the adventure, the second death of that same adventure, and one of the characters that was there for that moment was played by my co-host James. And he knew as a player, as probably as much as a character, just how deadly poisons are in that system. They are exceptionally dangerous, and it was not a combat scenario at the start. It was actually like you've called me to you for some information. It was in a nightclub. This famous singer has called them out of nowhere, knowing who they are, to come in and have a conversation, and she serves them all wine. And he knows the wine. He's so sure the wine is laced with poison, but he tries to pull the game face. He tries to be the brave and drink the wine and stare her down and call her bluff, if you will. And within 3 rounds, he was permanently dead from the poison, unable to recover. The whole party's balance was unable to offer him any support in that moment, and he went down so quickly. And it was that unceremonious death, so quick and sudden and brutal, and the effect it had on the players again and the characters. Mm-hmm. It resonated again. This is the second big one, and they were feeling the jarring nature of this, having experienced it once before, and they thought they were past it, and they thought they were bigger and stronger, and they again doubled down on the role play, and it was really emotional, and it was just awesome. It was super, super cool. So all the issues we had with playing that system in general, and differences of style of play, those moments have always stood out, I think, to the whole group, because they were really, really dramatic in very different ways, and were really, really awesome.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, in keeping, actually, is a little bit of a change from what we normally do, in keeping with Encounter This's style of doing things. Instead of clinking our glasses, we are going to crack open a can in memory of these characters as we remind ourselves there's always a first time for everything. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. So once again, Freeman, if you'd like to tell our listeners where they can find Encounter This, where they can find you, anything else you're working on, anything you want to plug, go ahead and do it.
Sweet. I love the shameful self-promotion on this. Yes, of course, we were connected by Peace Joy Pancakes, an avid listener of both of our podcasts. Absolutely lovely person. And you can find myself and my co-host James at Encounter This, always with an exclamation mark, in case that matters. And of course, patreon.com/encounterpod, Twitter @encounterpod, facebook.com/encounterpod, and instagram.com/encounter.pod, and encounterthis.ca, of course. I would also like to plug that we are coming up on our 2-year anniversary on October 31st. We launched on Halloween.
Woo.
And the day after that, we will also be launching our very first actual play podcast. This is something that James and I have been working on with a couple of other friends, one of which is from the East Coast, who has a nice thicker accent than me, so you might enjoy that. And we've been working on this idea for the better part of a year and a half, all through COVID. And we are not the first to actually enter the market with this narrative, but we are running Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We are playing remotely and doing the Adventure Path Abomination Vaults, which is essentially a mega dungeon. So we're not the first to market to do this story, but we are certainly taking a different approach than what is out there. And we have put a lot of effort into curating the music in a way that you don't hear on really any actual play that I know of. We are pushing for a lot of creative writing and interaction and sort of planning behind the scenes between character and GM and how to present the story. We don't do a massive info dump at the start of episode 1. Mm-hmm. We did that deliberately because it can get really, really dull and boring and overloaded. And we really wanted to switch that up. We are going to tell this story over time through expositions and creative writing, flashbacks, and more importantly, roleplay. I was able to give Gabe a sneak peek of the first episode, and he gave us some very positive feedback.
It is fantastic.
Thank you very much. Our first 4 episodes will drop on November 1st, because they are all 4 are slightly different format, especially the first one, than the average episode will be, and they really over those 4 flesh out the characters that are being involved and really set the setting and mood. It also is a good stretch of us getting our feet back on the ground after a bit of a hiatus of playing, so that we could get the nitty gritty details finished. But I'm super stoked about it. The show is called Stemming the Tide, and it is under an umbrella name known as Uncharted North. We really, really hope and are planning for releasing multiple bits of content, multiple shows over time, especially if we gain traction. We did test recording all through the summer that we plan to release as free content fairly shortly. And we're just super stoked. We want to play multiple systems. We want to do all kinds of things, interchange GMs, and just really make a big project out of it. And so I'm super stoked. That's Uncharted North, and the show will be called Stemming the Tide. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say all that.
No problem. Is this the first time it will have been mentioned on the internet, or have you already mentioned on Encounter This?
No, that's pretty much true. Yeah, we have social medias. Everything's going to basically under Uncharted North or Uncharted No across the board, and we have a website in the works. But as of right now, nothing is really open and public yet. So this will certainly be the first internet plug, I think. And
well, I am honored. Yeah.
I'm even more honored. So hopefully we'll have more content rolling out very shortly to introduce the show before it launches. But cool, November 1st is the date.
Yeah. If you want to, whenever that does go live, send me a link and I will I'll plug it on social media for you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I absolutely will.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Hope you had a good time.
A great time, yeah.
Awesome. Well, to submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the funeral pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, links to media mentioned on the show, and running lists of questions and magic items, go to interpartyconflict.com. Join the discussion on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Reddit, we're on our Interparty Discord. You can find us on Twitter @InPartyConflict. Check those out for our weekly social media questions. Your answers might end up on the show. Hopefully the Facebook will have been sorted out by this point. No promises, though. Find us on the podcatcher of your choice. We're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you download podcasts. Please rate, review, subscribe, or just tell a friend. We have suspended the majority of our Patreon, but if you would still like to give us $1 a month to go towards hosting fees over the coming future, you can find that at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. And, for everybody who has donated over the last few years, we really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Jeff, tell us about FriendQuest.
FriendQuest is a YouTube channel where you can watch us play video games.
Yes. Also, head over to bit.ly/InterPartyConflict to take a short survey about our show. It's really just one question, and it's what's your favorite memory from the show? If you take that short survey, you can get 2 free printable board games courtesy of the great people over at hollandspiel.com. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG. So, Freeman, until next time...
Next time on Encounter This, we will be covering the spawn of Kios. Is that how you said it?
Yeah. Do you want to do that over, or is that good?
No, not at all. Keep this part in. Jeff and Gabe and InterPartyConflict were generous enough to subscribe to our Patreon at a tier that allowed for a creature request, and I will be personally covering the spawn of Kios at Gabe's request. And I know basically nothing about this creature as of this moment, and I'm pretty excited to see what it entails. So hopefully that should drop a couple weeks after we finish our suite of Orktober.
Good.
I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it will be coming soon.
All right. Jeff, do you have an actual send-off for us?
No.